Bien, profesor Donati, lo felicito por su exposición y por su texto. Permítame hacer dos breves comentarios y una pregunta, seré breve. Primero, todo don, de lo que hemos hablado en estos días, contiene elementos característicos como son la sobreabundancia, la gratuidad y no la gratitud, como se nos dijo en la traducción el primer día, pero también todo don contiene elementos de sorpresa, la exigencia de asumir el acontecer de lo no previsto, y ello implica la apertura a lo nuevo y a lo inesperado, en términos cristianos diríamos a la providencia. Para mí participar en este seminario es un regalo, un verdadero don, que contiene también su fuerte dosis de sorpresa. Una de las últimas sorpresas es ver mi nombre comentando su ponencia, esta última, dado que en la comunicación que se me emitió solamente aparecía comentar la conferencia del Padre Scanone. Por lo tanto, y por respeto a usted y a su trabajo intelectual y también por respeto a la audiencia, no quiero comentar exactamente los esquemas ni los conceptos que usted ha expuesto y también nos ha regalado en su texto y sobre lo cual estoy fundamentalmente de acuerdo. Sin embargo, aprovecho la ocasión para hacer una reflexión simple sobre el ejercicio, máxime que estamos ya terminando, el ejercicio que hemos hecho en estos días. En esta sala veo que se han estado presentando no solamente dos contextos diferentes, el norteamericano y europeo por un lado y el de América Latina por el otro, sino que también están presentes, creo entender, dos lógicas cercanas pero no tanto, aparentemente convergentes pero no tanto. Y por un lado es la lógica de la academia, con todo su rigor científico y metodológico, representada por los sociólogos y los economistas aquí presentes, y que son los más, pero también está otra lógica dirigida más hacia la acción, hacia las prácticas comunitarias, desde una reflexión de cuño filosófico o teológico moral, también de acción educativa e incluso de acción pastoral. Y me parece ver que el cruce de estas dos lógicas no ha sido fácil. No siempre nos hemos sabido escuchar y mucho menos hemos sabido cruzar o imbricar o armonizar las visiones y los argumentos. Nos hemos quedado con dos líneas de argumentación, me parece, paralelas. Segundo, en sentido estricto, no puedo estar ni a favor ni en contra de lo que usted ha dicho, doctor Donati. Lo que sucede es que no me veo reflejado en lo que ha expuesto por el contexto social del que provengo, social, cultural, y también por la actividad a la que me dedico. Los contextos determinan más de lo que a veces nos damos cuenta. Profesor Carlos Havel por la mañana decía que en América Latina, para hablar de welfare state, y generalizando, pues más bien lo que ha existido, no ha existido un welfare state, lo mencionó en esos términos, sino que más bien nos situamos en una realidad de estados neopatrimonialistas. En América Latina más bien tenemos una realidad de estados subsidiarios que no logran garantizar todos los derechos humanos a todas las personas, incluso en algunos casos de forma dramática lo contrario. América Latina particularmente, son muchas Américas Latinas, y a pesar de que Iglesia en América habló de una sola América, la realidad es otra. Y predominan condiciones de estados deficientes, ineficientes, ineficaces, débiles, autoritarios, superados por la realidad, y algunos se acercan incluso a ser llamados estados fallidos, aunque me parece una exageración. Las condiciones predominantes en nuestras comunidades, en nuestras sociedades y también en nuestros estados-nación, leo algunas características, ante todo es la profunda desigualdad social, económica y también de oportunidades. La brecha entre ricos y pobres sigue creciendo, aunque existan por ahí algunas mediciones e indicaciones que digan lo contrario o que parece que reactivan la llamada clase media. A partir de lo anterior, en América Latina tenemos poblaciones flotantes, poblaciones migrantes, altas tasas de natalidad en zonas empobrecidas y un férreo control natal en las ciudades, grandes ciudades, ahora secularizadas, en donde las parejas ya no tienen hijos, cuidan perros. Hay también la falta de oportunidades para el desarrollo digno, sobre todo de las jóvenes generaciones. La mayor parte de jóvenes en América Latina y los estados no tienen políticas suficientes o adecuadas para garantizar un trabajo digno para las jóvenes que van saliendo de las universidades. Todo esto nos lleva a expresiones que van desde una flexibilización del trabajo hasta nuevas formas de trabajo esclavo. En muchas de nuestras ciudades en América Latina está presente con crudeza, y particularmente lo digo por mi país México, y lo digo con pesar, la violencia, la inseguridad, la corrupción, la ausencia de un Estado de Derecho y lo peor, la falta de confianza, lo que significa un debilitamiento del tejido social que nos aleja de todo este planteamiento de políticas y de estrategias relacionales a nivel del sustrato más básico que son las personas y las comunidades. En nuestro continente de América Latina también existen gobiernos populistas que subsidian no el desarrollo, sino lo que subsidian es el consumo y van favoreciendo que las clases pobres y empobrecidas lo único que tengan son recursos para el subsidio, pero no para el desarrollo. Sobre esto se han hecho estudios, hay una cantidad enorme de recursos que se han destinado por parte de fundaciones internacionales o por políticas del gobierno y que después de 20 décadas no han modificado nada los índices de subdesarrollo de las naciones. Hay una gran cantidad de jóvenes que no estudian ni trabajan, se llaman los ninis, 600,000 en Chile, pero en México son 5 millones y en todos estos países usted encuentra una enorme cantidad, lo que es un desafío enorme no solamente para las políticas sociales, sino para todos los actores. Hay una que yo le llamo mal convivencia entre las élites plutocráticas, de las que ya nos habló en varias ocasiones Monseñor Marcelo, y los grupos numerosos de pobres mal educados, mal empleados, mal pagados, mal atendidos en su cobertura sanitaria, etcétera, etcétera. Nuestros conflictos sociopolíticos en muchas de nuestras naciones todavía están enfocados a preservar o a sostener nuestra incipiente democracia y estamos muy lejos de avanzar en términos de democracia económica. Los derechos socioeconómicos siguen pendientes para muchas comunidades y grupos y tenemos como sociedades mixtas, quizás ese sea un detalle a considerar, tanto probablemente menos en Estados Unidos, pero en Estados Unidos y sobre todo en Europa, distinto de lo que es en nuestras sociedades, pues hay una mayor homogeneidad social, cultural e incluso a veces en lo económico. En cambio, nuestras sociedades están conformadas por grupos culturales y religiosamente secularizados y grupos con una fuerte religiosidad popular, incluso todavía sujetas a purificación. Voy terminando. En México al menos hay una población básicamente religiosa, la mayor parte de la gente se define con convicciones de orden religioso y por números de bautismos y estadísticas, pues la mayoría serían católicos, y sin embargo tenemos un marco jurídico que nos rige que sigue siendo antirreligioso. Todas estas variantes, todas estas características hacen entonces que el contexto de los países latinoamericanos tenga que ser tratada per se, y a lo mejor por eso hemos tenido cierta dificultad en imbricar los razonamientos y los argumentos que se han esgrimido en esta mesa. Finalmente, y paso a la pregunta, viendo su texto, quizás no tanto en la exposición, cuanto más bien en el texto, doctor Donati, escribe usted: creo que el estado del bienestar será forzado a cambiar los principios políticos y éticos fundamentales sobre los cuales ha venido sosteniendo a lo largo de este tiempo. Y mi pregunta es precisamente, como académico que es usted, ¿quién va a alimentar estos nuevos principios políticos y desde dónde se puede abrevar o beber de un nuevo fundamento ético? ¿Quién y desde dónde encontrar la fuerza para transitar a todas estas estrategias relacionales que usted nos ha presentado? Y si la Iglesia y si la doctrina social de la Iglesia tiene alguna oportunidad para hacerlo. Muchas gracias.
Thank you, Victor. Now, Paolo, you have now a few minutes to answer directly. And then we will have another few minutes for the general discussion. Please.
Okay, very briefly, thank you, Dr. Chavez. I agree with all you have said. Of course, contexts are so different that solutions also should be very different. What I wanted to argue in my paper is that anyway, it is possible also in the very difficult conditions of South American countries to adopt new policy initiatives and look at different welfare configurations and arrangements which can be taken from other countries, as we, in Italy, for instance, we take a lot of inspiration from Scandinavian countries or Germany or Eastern countries sometimes. So your question, your direct question, is who can change these situations, in particular in South America, where do these new ethical political principles come from? Precisely from what I call civil society. Now, civil society is not only constituted by social movements, which are of course very important in terms of advocacy activities, protest activities, asking the state to recognize more rights. We say to give more rights, the state as creator and distributor of rights. So to recognize more social, economic, human rights to people, but also organizing services. My impression is, but I am totally mistaken, maybe, that in Central and Southern America, the first activity, the advocacy protest activity, is prevalent and in some way the only one in respect to organizing services. By organizing services, I mean to adopt policy strategies, not only to help people in some way or another. Of course, there are a lot of small or local organizations, and even big organizations, think of Caritas, for instance, organizing services. But these services are not linked to the other sector of society. What is lacking, to my mind, is the networking activity. Networking means the richness in relations, through relations, with relations, because it's important, of course, that there is a group of people helping in a neighborhood some destituted person or families. That's, of course, absolutely important. But if it is an isolated, marginal activity without networking in the locality, in a much more, let's say, in a wider perspective of activities linking to other actors. That is why I mentioned the local alliances for families, which is an experience coming from Germany, as I told you, and now widespread in Europe. Because the idea is not to have a shop or a school or a hospital family-friendly, but to have the whole networks and networks of networks in a valley, in a big city, in a neighborhood, working together and being solidary in doing the same multi-purpose activity in favor of families and family needs, which are the first welfare need that people have, caring for children, caring for the elderly, when there are illnesses within the family and so on and so forth. So to sum up, what I want to say is that the principles, and certainly the Church, can inspire these actors. But as far as I know, the principles of the social doctrine are still at a very general level, very abstract level. When you have to apply them to the reality, you need strategies, techniques, and network strategies and techniques are necessary in order to link the organization of services with the advocacy and protest movements. That's what I see lacking in many cases, and in particular in many southern countries. Thank you.
Thank you, Pier Paolo. Now we have a few minutes for Adalbert, and then please, Adalbert. Please, get ready so we do not wait time.
Thank you very much. I mean, I just want, first of all, say something apart, because it's a point, I think, which refers to the whole conference we had here, and it's very important. I fully share the view of given here that we should see the family as part of the civil society. And while it makes these debates much easier to cut it out, to put it in a way to the private sphere, and outside these differentiated systems, it might be a big failure, because all the vices we debated, which in a way confront the civil society, monetarization, instrumentalism, etc., are today met by families, by certain family policies, or by the powers of the market. So I think from that point of view, it makes sense, and maybe somehow it should be mentioned that we are aware that we had operated here with a fairly restrictive notion, sectorial notion of the civil society. But that's this is just to deposit it. So this we share. The second point, I'm not sure whether we share this. This is about the meaning of relational. I'm still, after all these years, we have partly cooperated, a little puzzled about it, puzzled by the fact that there is one dimension of the relational I think I can fully grasp. This is to get off of a kind of approach which I found sometimes in these days here, which I would call a substantialist approach. So you treat, I simplify horribly, you treat the entities of state, market, and the civil society as kind of bricks. You give them a name, you give them a kind of basic logic, and then you combine these bricks, and the way you combine it, you come to different buildings. But I think a relational approach, and I can't elaborate on that here, it's similar to a post-structuralist approach, defines the role and the meaning of one area according to the interrelations it has with other ones. So to give you an utmost simplistic example, empirical researches in Scandinavia have shown that the civic quality of third sector organizations depend from the kind of interrelations they have with other sectors. Very much community-oriented, just one point, outside relations, gives this civic organization a fairly different meaning from other ones which have a light of rich interrelations. So I think this is a big good thing about having a relational approach as a methodology. I have my, but then it would be too lengthy, I have my problems then to call the system a relational system, because then the question comes up, which kind of relations? Relations of dominance, relations of supportive, etc. But I leave it aside, and I end up with one remark. It's a question to Pier Paolo. Can we really debate with a relational approach that is not very much a historical approach. Because once we leave this idea that these different bricks have a kind of invariant nature, this is what I would call a substantialist concept of these bricks, then we end up with the fact that they change to a considerable degree in their constellation over time and within history. And then having a fairly abstract approach, which is at the same time a relational approach, is a little bit of uneasy tension in itself. So far my comment. I hope it made myself understood.
Very quickly, the first comment was about the family, and I think it's a very important one. De facto families are kind of proto-enterprises that produce goods, and they have to be taken into account in this conference. But that, and the approach of multi-sectoral of the economy. But the point to relation, I have two questions. One, how do you, and that's a conversation with Michael Schluter, who is in Cambridge working about the metrics for relations. Can we envisage relation between abstract institutions or between institutions, or does relation only imply a person-to-person relation? And so can a bank have a relation with the client, or is it the desk management or account manager of the bank that has a relation with? That's one question. And the other one, you mentioned it, is every relation, every type of relation as good as any other? Or should we speak somewhere about the kind of finality of the relation?
I have a sort of a terminological question. Are we sure that it's proper to talk about sectors? Because sectors can stay in perfect isolation among themselves. So isn't it better to talk about spheres of societies? Because since we want, as you properly stressed, to have according to the relational approach, I mean, using the word sectors perhaps is not the best way to make your argument understood. The other aspect, you said that competition related to solidarity according to. Of course, now I play the role of the devil's advocate. I repeat, devil's advocate. One economist all over the world would say, oh, but that is something unacceptable, because competition should be related to efficiency, not to solidarity. Because unless you have a sphere, or not sector, sphere, which generates new wealth, it is obvious that you cannot redistribute what is not being produced. In other words, a competition related to solidarity runs the risk of making the whole system unsustainable. How would you react to that? You have now 3 minutes to answer all these questions. Thank you.
Thank you for these very interesting questions. Now, Adalbert, I agree totally with you. I mean, these, of course, are not bricks, what I called in the slides sectors. As I told very, very briefly, there are processes, flows, relations are dynamics. Of course, they are both processes and established structures, which in turn change into processes, giving birth to new structures, and so on and so on. So it is only for reasons of representation that I have put these labels and sectors on the screen. But I agree with you. I mentioned in one of my last slides the fact that in the networks every relation and every activity or initiative depends not only on its own relations but on the relations within the networks related to that. So we are perfectly in agreement, no? Sorry, the history, the microphone, I cannot understand. Sorry, we talk about that. To Professor Dembinski, yes, we can have metrics for relations and relational goods, both at the interpersonal, intersubjective level and between institutions. Because structural relations are relations between roles, positions within a structure, while interpersonal, intersubjective relations, of course, depend on agency more than on structure. On this point, I think there is a lot to do, and I've written a paper whose title is Measuring Intangibles. And it is an empirical research on how to measure relational goods as intangibles. That is, measuring relations as goods. The finality of relation, yes, well, any relation, be it intersubjective, interpersonal, or structural, has its own structure. I call it the social molecule of the relationship, which of course can be more processual if we have to do with a relation in a process. But relations also, as I said just a minute ago, become institutions. They become something of a structure, of a more stable structure. It is the lexical ambiguity of many terms, like associations. Association is a word which indicates a process of associating and an association as an organization. So you have both, okay? Now to Stefano, yes, of course, in my paper I use more the term sphere than sector. It was only to comply with the audience because the audience talks about sectors, but I agree with you that spheres is, you can also talk about fields, not in a Bourdian sense, but fields in the sense of the network analysis, networked fields. Which is different. Okay, so competition within a solidarity network is not exactly the point you asked for. I mean, you say, well, competition is usually referred to efficiency for an economist, for economy. I don't doubt about that, but what about the contour, the conditions of the context within which competition is referred to efficiency? Because every dimension of the relationship and of agency, of actions in general, should be related to the others, to the other dimensions, I mean, of the situation. So I think that we had to, as I have written in one slide, to think of a relational theory of society, or if you want, a relational theory of relations of the social, and this is a very long way to go, but I have written a lot on that, and I think that I would need a lot of time to explain what is my thinking about that. Thank you.
Thank you.